Good evening and welcome back to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think nutmeg is a spice that you put in your eggnog.
Oh, man. Eggnog. Right, okay. All right.
Don't drink it myself. I don't even like eggs at all, but I've heard that people do.
Yeah. Is there eggs in eggnog? I thought that was just like a long forgotten tradition and now it's just full of booze.
I'll have some booze, hold the nog then.
There you go. Perfect. Now, the first time I heard of that was Clark Griswold. The last time I heard about it was some guy just before Christmas getting very upset in Fry's, which is a local supermarket chain here in Arizona, because, well, they didn't have eggnog, and I'm pretty sure it was a fair distance before Christmas, like October. A nutmeg, in case you're wondering what that is a particularly embarrassing incident whereby the attacking player...
Is that our word of the week, Arran?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, it is the word of the week. Quite right. It's a particularly embarrassing occurrence whereby an attacking player dribbles or passes the ball through the defender's legs. I'm going to go over here to Phil's great resource in football knowledge, Urban Dictionary, and tell you about a nutmeg. Nutmeg is a useful spice. It may taste like shit, but you'll be high for days. I don't know if that's true. And also, we're talking about the wrong thing. Wait. Here we go. Nutmeg. In football, in brackets, soccer, a nutmeg is where you pass the ball through an opponent's legs. This doesn't have to be the goalkeeper. I nutmegged him, said Ian Chode. Good for him. We saw a wonderful nutmeg the other day as well in the Europa League during the week when Arsenal was playing Napoli in the quarterfinal. Lacazette. It just bamboozled this poor Napoli defender. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and it led to a goal. That's the ultimate nutmeg. As a defender, you don't want the ball to happen to sort of roll between your legs because you're meant to have that bit covered, but it happens with great frequency, and the crowd loves it. I love it. I certainly loved that one the other day. Phil, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, the nutmeg, it's one of those things that is particularly embarrassing for the defender because it means that the defender was either A, out of position, or at least had their feet out of position, because it's one thing to get beat to the right or get beat to the left because sometimes a guy is just faster than you.
Yep.
But if the ball goes between your legs, that means you've made a mistake.
Big time. And the crowd will let you know. On tonight's very salty episode, Mr. Wizard and the brother from Down Under get into a little dust-up. We discuss remortgaging the Across the Pitch studios, and Phil has uncovered the cure for cancer. Or so he thinks.
We should mention that we're recording this introduction here on Friday, April the 12th. This is part 3 of episode 25, which we actually recorded last Wednesday. However, what we did record in this part of the episode is not time sensitive. We're not reviewing any games or anything like that.
Right.
What we're doing is having a bit of a discussion of the financial situation, particularly what is happening in the lower leagues. And I do want to preface that I do make some suggestions that I don't necessarily think are feasible under the current way that things work in European football. I'm mostly making suggestions based on the fact that, okay, we're a show that compares American sports to English football.
Right.
So the discussion has to be made. So that's where I'm coming from on that side of the argument, because as I mentioned to Andy Holt on Twitter, one of the few things that American sports do seem to get right is the system where they take the TV contract money, that money is evenly divided among all of the teams, and then a salary cap is set based on that guaranteed money that's coming in to make sure that the franchises don't ever overextend themselves.
Yes. Remarkable system, that. I know we've spoken about this before. We'll get into it very shortly. I know. And also, I have to point out that Mr. Wizard isn't actually here to defend himself in the intro. Because he does get a bit of a, well, I guess you could say, a thumb pointed in his direction. Do you know what I mean? I guess, we don't have the benefit. He doesn't have the benefit of defending himself, but it is a very, very big issue in football right now. Very few people seem to be talking about it because the system over there in Europe, especially, is just market capitalism at its greatest. I don't want to get into politics about it, but it is a wonderful way of having a look about how that actually operates as opposed to American sports, where by and large, it is an enclosed system, right, Phil?
Correct, yes. I mean, other than Major League Baseball, right. And in Major League Baseball, what you end up seeing is the same teams, the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, the Los Angeles Dodgers. You end up with a big six, and you have what are called selling teams, where you have the teams like the Arizona Diamondbacks, for instance, that couldn't afford to keep Paul Goldschmidt, couldn't afford to keep A.J. Pollock, couldn't afford to keep Patrick Corbin. So three of their veterans walked away. Well, they did make a trade for Goldschmidt and got some prospects in return, but two of their other top veteran players literally walked away to bigger market teams for nothing. No direct transfer fees or anything like that, just because the Diamondbacks aren't a rich enough team to be able to afford those long-term contracts to veteran players. And the NFL, the NBA, which are basketball and American football, or even the National Hockey League, which is actually U.S. and Canada. In the National Hockey League is a great example where that league in the late 1990s was on a financial crisis and almost completely going out of business as a league. They actually completely shut the sport down for 2 whole years.
What?
Players' union finally agreed to a salary cap, and they've thrived ever since.
Wow, I did not actually know that. That's incredible. It speaks volumes about the game in Europe and just how strong and popular it is. In that we'll get into it, shall we?
I think that we're ready. Let's welcome Mr. Wizard back and let's talk some finance. This is like the part of the prequel Star Wars movies that everybody doesn't like.
Thank you. It's a gritty reboot of Across the Pitch, if you will.
Yeah. We do still keep our normal sense of humor.
Lads, can you loan me some cash? Because I'm a little broke. I need a loan. I want to talk about loans for a little minute because I have this grand unifying theory about everything that's wrong with, well, English football in general. And I think loans are a big part of this, right?
Is it just English or is it all?
I think it's particularly pronounced in England because you've got, here's my theory. You've got these mega clubs at the top of the tree, right? Manchester City, Chelsea, and I'm putting a big finger in your direction, Matt. I know you can't see me right now, but I'm pointing at your team over there because you're one of the main reasons why there is such a big problem further down the tree, I think. When I say you, I mean Chelsea. You've got like 39 loan players out. 39 players on your roster out on loan. You're hoarding these players. So's Man City, for that matter. Arsenal kind of gets a buy, but not really. Liverpool, Man United is probably another one that needs a good looking at. Here's the problem. Big teams are paying big money for players, whether they deserve it or not, and they're hoarding them and they're farming them off. What's happening is that your lower league teams are buying players at an elevated rate, so that's if they want to actually sign them up or they can loan them. Loan players aren't there for the long haul. They don't care. They're still playing for their mother club, whoever that might be, whether that be Man City, whether that be Chelsea. Sorry, Matt, I'm going to have a go to you, mate. Please stick up for yourself here and your team, but I think I'm onto something here. So you've got these inflated prices for players because they're hoarding players over here out on loans and calling them back when required. Sometimes they're year-long loans. Sometimes they were calling back when required. This is why you're seeing financial problems with lower teams, because they're not being released, these players. You can't pick up these young and upcomers and breed them into League One and the Championship. They've been hoarded by these players and hauled off afterwards. I think the loan system, and especially the way that the big clubs are hoarding these players and loaning them out, is broken. That's my grand unifying thing. And this is why a lot of these teams, such as your Birminghams, your Blackburns, your Boltons, to name but 3 Bs, this is why they're in so much strife, is that they're having to exert themselves. They're having to extend so much money in order to promote themselves that when they don't get promoted, they go bust. Wolves are lucky. They're doing quite well in the Premier League. They spent an enormous amount of money buying players in order to get up into the Premier League last year. Fulham is in massive trouble right now. They spent enormous amounts the previous year, something in the order of £140 million, and they've bounced straight back down. Balloon payments aren't going to cover those wages. They're not going to cover their losses. They're in a huge amount of strife, and it all comes down to player wages. Talk to me about this, lads. That was my grand unifying rant of all things wrong with modern football. Am I wrong?
Yes.
All right, I want to hear it.
So here's my thought.
Right.
I don't think loan players are the reason behind this inflated, ridiculous market we're seeing, right? So you look at some of these buyout clauses that players have, and you have clubs like PSG and Man City that come in that are owned by countries. And so they're spending ridiculous amounts of money on one player because his buyout clause is so large. And then that just naturally inflates the market. Okay. So, I mean, you brought up like Bolton Wanderers. And so you look at their squad and they have 4 players on loan this season. Any guesses what clubs they're from?
Chelsea.
They have 2 players on loan from Everton.
Really?
They have 1 player on loan from Birmingham City.
Really?
And 1 player on loan from Norwich.
Okay. There are rules in place, I should say. You are only allowed 2 loan players per season to another Premier League team. I think that does change in lower leagues, but that doesn't count for other leagues around the world either, so you can farm out your players to whomever.
Right. So a lot of loan players are going out to various countries. But even like Birmingham City has 2 players on loan, 1 from Bournemouth, 1 from Villa. Blackburn has 1 player on loan from Southampton.
So you're saying loan players aren't the problem?
I think when you look at clubs like Bolton and Birmingham and Blackburn, loan players aren't the problem. I think it's the owner.
Yeah, mismanagement.
It's just mismanagement. So, like, now Fulham's an interesting squad to bring up because I think it's both mismanagement in the sense of what they did. So they poured money into the club when they got promoted, but in not the right way.
Right.
So they poured money in.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they poured money in bringing in a lot of loan players, and they bought only a couple, like a handful. So, they went out and bought Jean-Michael Surrey, and then they went out and bought Mitrovic.
Yeah, they spent a ton of money on Mitrovic.
But then they brought in guys like Callum Chambers, Andre Schürrle, Timothy Mensah from United, a guy from Atletico Madrid, a goalkeeper from Sevilla. And so, yeah, I think that's where you're kind of, if you're hedging your bet, you're starting 11 is full of loan players. They don't care about the club they're at. They're looking to get back for next year. And I think this is actually a really interesting discussion as we talk about our local club, Phoenix Rising.
And we did speak about this a little bit on Pundits with Pints the other day too. But go on.
Phoenix Rising has 6 players on loan right now, mostly from
LAFC.
Yeah. And the way it works with MLS is you can recall those players at any time.
Yeah, and that sucks. I'm sorry, that's just bollocks.
Yeah, it's tough, man. So, like, if we look at this past weekend against Colorado Springs, Phoenix Rising started 3 players on loan out of the 11. Out of their subs, 1 loan player came on. So, at one time, we had 4 loan players on the field and another one on the bench. And when you're trying to build a team with loan players that make up, it's next to impossible. And so, I think that's where the issue of loan players comes in. If Birmingham or Bolton were in we saw it with Fulham this year. Perfect. Fulham's in a relegation battle very early on in the season, and their loan players just check out because it's like, you know what? Phil mentioned earlier, this is the second time Callum Chambers has been relegated when he's been out on loan. But why does that matter to Callum Chambers? Once the season's over, he goes back to Arsenal, and in reality, he probably gets loaned out next year or he gets sold this summer. He's looking out for himself. He's not looking out for the club. I don't think the issue with the financial struggles of Bolton and Birmingham and Blackpool are loan players. I think it's just club mismanagement.
You're right. There's certainly a part of it. By the way, I just want to say I watched that game yesterday when Watford absolutely walloped Fulham, and Fulham were relegated, and I didn't see too many tears from those relegated players there. They didn't look particularly devastated about it because, yes, it was inevitable. They didn't really care.
Correct, yeah. I mean, at some part, right, Andre Schürrle's going back to Dortmund, Callum Chambers going back to Arsenal, Timothy Mensah's going back to United, Sergio Rico's going back to Sevilla. I mean, once the season's over, they pack up and leave. They're not going to be there next year.
But it kind of ties into what I'm saying, though, is that, these big clubs are hoarding these players. You can't buy them. You can't instill the system or the passion in the club with them because they're just loan players.
You have two different things, really. So I am in full agreement that having too many loan players causes problems on the field. In terms of the financial problem, it's like anything else. It starts to the top and trickles down. And this honestly could be an argument for maybe why there should be that Super League that's been talked about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
So here's what you're looking at. In American sports, particularly in the NFL, the NBA, even MLS, and in hockey, baseball doesn't, but the other sports, they all have something called a salary cap. And this salary cap is in place to do two things. One is to prevent the super rich teams from just being able to buy up all the players like you see happen with the Big Six of the Premier League. The other thing it does is it kind of prevents the owners or saves them from themselves in terms of that the salary cap is based on league revenue, so the team is only going to be expending money to actually come in on players. They also do revenue sharing. I don't want to get that deep into it. But the problem is the English Premier League could never do a salary cap, because then if they did a salary cap, it would be great and you could have parity and you could have 20 Premier League teams all competing, and that would be great. But then you'd never compete with Barcelona or PSG in the Champions League. So that's an argument where maybe if you do take these 15 or so super rich teams in the world, put them in one league, and then have everybody else play in their natural leagues, that's the only way that you maybe are able to level things out financially. Otherwise, you're going to have clubs that are biting off more than they can chew, like Fulham.
Which they are.
I think that the best thing that you can compare Fulham to in NASCAR, you have teams where the cars are good enough to win, and then there's other teams that don't have enough money to have a car that's good enough to win. And sometimes you'll have a driver that goes out there and tries to take a 30th place car and tries to win with it. What happens with them? They end up in the wall. Fulham is a team that tried to take a 30th place car and win the Premier League with it, or I guess a 20th place car and win the Premier League, and that's why they're into the wall.
The EPL is a wonderful capitalist experiment. In fact, soccer in general is really, I'm not going to get political about this, but you're right, Phil. You can't have a salary cap. If it was FIFA, which is the governing body for international football, has tried to bring in this financial fair play rules, which by and large haven't worked. It's just absolutely rubbish.
A Super League doesn't solve any of this.
Still doesn't.
Because you remove those teams and form a Super League, you're going to have then guys that come in and buy a few teams that are left in the Premier League, and you're still going to get a top 6 or a top 4 or whatever. It's always...
If you have the Super League, then you could institute a salary cap in the Premier League.
It still couldn't be the Premier League. It'd have to be a FIFA sanctioned by the various football leagues agreement that said, right, you can only spend X amount.
Yeah, but you're never going to get the countries are never going to agree on that. Spain's never going to agree, okay, I'm going to only spend the same amount as England.
Right, you're just getting the same situation. So you create a Super League, which I think is a horrible idea.
I agree with you.
You take teams out of their domestic leagues, create some Super League, and then you're still going to have teams within every league. In places like France, we might see a top 2 become a big 4, or in Germany, we might see a big 2 become a big 5 or 6, but you're still going to have those guys coming in and buying a team and getting them and spending money and pumping money into the club to spend money, and you're still going to create a disparity to a point. I mean, you see this in the German league with Red Bull.
Right.
Red Bull comes in,
Exactly.
They create Red Bull Leipzig.
So that's what I'm saying is you create the Super League with the rich teams that can spend whatever, and then in the domestic leagues, they change to more of an American salary cap revenue sharing system.
I get that, but why would England want to create a salary cap and then limit what the English teams can? You create a Super League, there's still going to be a Champions League, right? UEFA is not going to give up that money.
No,
so they're still going to have a
money.
Champions League.
And you're right, Matt. By the way, there's a whole thing about Brexit. So as if the FA, which is the Football Association in England, is going to agree with the European mandate. It ain't going to happen.
The Premier League would have to agree with the Football League,
right? True,
over a salary cap. UEFA wouldn't get rid of the Champions League because they like that incoming money. The Super League wouldn't be the Champions League because that's not a Champions League, right? A Champions League these are the people that won their domestic competitions or did well in them. It's just creating the same problem. Plus, you're ripping out history from all these different leagues. I think that's a bad idea.
I'm throwing out an idea where you say, well, maybe if you do this and you do this. And I mean, certainly maybe this is a discussion that would need a little bit more deeper explanation behind what I'm saying. But basically what I'm getting at, I guess the main point I was trying to get at is that the only way that you would ever run into a way that all the teams are on a level playing field financially is by putting in an NFL style system where basically all of the teams are only allowed to spend the same amount of money and then they all share income with each other so they all make the same amount of money.
I don't think there's a need for that, personally.
Not yet. I do feel that there is probably some rumblings happening in the lower leagues where there isn't that share of TV revenue for one. I mean, there's a huge disparity between even the Championship and Premier League, and then again from the Premier League into the Champions League. It is the rich getting richer. I can understand the rumblings. I also feel like that the expense for these lower clubs, and we spoke, like, just for example, tonight we spoke about Norwich, for them having to get into the Premier League. They're going to have to spend big money. Do you do that? Or do you just try and play your way out of it? I can tell you're going to have to spend money to play in the Premier League. And,
right.
And there's rumblings there, and I can understand it.
But look at Wolves.
Look at Wolves.
Wolves came up. They spent the money.
They got big investment, though. Didn't they have an investment group that...
Right. So eventually, people are seeing the money that can be made in the Premier League, and you're seeing more big investors come in.
Yes.
So I think we're talking two different things, right? There will never be equal pay between the Premier League and the Championship and League One, but there is a possibility that we could figure out how to make it equitable pay. So a Championship side shouldn't make the same money off of TV revenue as Arsenal.
No, of course not.
Because Arsenal's bringing in,
I never
right?
said that. I was suggesting that all the Premier League teams would share revenue.
If you're talking share as an equal pay between Premier League teams.
For instance, in the NFL, every team gets the same cut of the TV contract. Now, there are concessions and stuff. They keep all that their own. I'm talking like the TV money is cut up into equal pieces of the pie, where in the Premier League, the Big Six get a bigger piece of the TV pie.
Right, because they're bringing in more ad revenue money.
What I'm getting at is that a stronger, more competitive league, like for instance, if Cardiff ends up playing Burnley, nobody watches that. But if Cardiff and Burnley became competitive, then it increases viewership overall. I guess the appeal of any team has a chance to win is what you're building, and that ultimately leads to increased interest in every team.
Right, and what I'm saying is if Cardiff wants to be competitive, then they need to figure out how to invest money to be competitive, right? So Wolves invested money and became competitive. They spent money last year. They created a team, and now they're sitting at 7th place in the Premier League in their first year promotion.
So you're saying, Matt, that they need to find better avenues for investment outside of that football pitch. So that is selling Wales as a destination, doing away trips to Southeast Asia and America, and somehow building the revenue in other ways other than TV rights. They just need to be smarter marketers.
Right. I mean, so football, right now is a business, right? So you look at like clubs like Barcelona, Real Madrid, the Big Six in England, PSG. What they do is so much more than just a game match day experience. I mean, it's a brand. It's a worldwide brand that those clubs have built. Manchester United is one of the richest sports organizations in the world, and they haven't been playing good football lately.
At the end of the day, though, you've got promotion, relegation. Someone has to lose big time.
Right.
It may not be fair, but that's the way it is. We love it. As fans, we love it. For our institutions that we love, that's fucking terrible.
Right.
Not that, Arsenal's been relegated in recent years.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? And it's tough because we're Americans. So
Who? Two-thirds of the show are. Yeah, right, okay.
The thing that I want to actually just kind of throw in real quick is I'm not suggesting that I necessarily want to see them do any of the things that I was mentioning. I was just more kind of like, if you want to have it where teams aren't going out of business, this has been the way that's proven to work with making that happen here. That's more what I was getting at.
All right.
Bolton's in the position it is because of the owner. What happened with Sunderland had nothing to do with what Sunderland was getting from TV rights. It had to do with their crappy owner.
Yeah.
And the crappy owner had to sell his club. And the FA has steps in there to make sure clubs ran properly.
Fit and fair test, I believe, is one of them. So they look back in the business dealings
Right.
of the owners in the past. They missed that one. That one's probably on their
They're
phone.
not very good. I mean, look at that Oyston guy that just got kicked out of Blackpool, and he was arrested for sexual assault, and they still let him own the team.
To have parity in the footballing world would take too much and would destroy the game.
Right.
You can't make leagues like the MLS. The MLS is such a unique league. And to try and get Spain or Germany or France or England to go that route would do more to harm the leagues and the teams over there than I think to help.
You're right. I don't know the answer to it. I feel like that there will be a crash in football at some point. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon. We'll be talking about that then.
Well, I think we'll eventually see, obviously there's like this player bubble.
We're seeing a bubble. We are seeing a bubble. You're right, yeah.
And eventually it's going to stop. Especially it looks like, to be fair to FIFA and UEFA, they've figured stuff out a little bit. So like with Chelsea, their appeal to stay the punishment was rejected because they're going to have their appeals hearing on April 11th. And so FIFA has made that a lot quicker. Whereas when clubs like Barca and Atletico and Real got the same injunction upon them, the appeals process took 8 to 9 months.
Yeah, right.
And so it seems like FIFA's getting there.
Yeah.
It's an evolving thing and it's frustrating, but it is what it is to some degree.
All right, lads, we're going to have to wrap that up. This has been a wonderful show. But before we do, we have news across the Pitch news desk. It has been announced that Shane Duffy has very bizarre football superstition. Now, for those of you who don't know who Shane Duffy is, that's okay, you're not alone. He's a Brighton player, but what he does is he ensures that he has a lucky toilet. So every time he uses the bathroom, he goes to the same cubicle when he arrives at an away dressing room, and probably at home as well. But the away one's important because Brighton and Hove Albion will be playing Tottenham on the 23rd of April.
So when he goes to Tottenham, does he just stand in the press box and piss
Go
off
wherever he wants. And on that bombshell.
That was about all I had for tonight. Did you have anything else, Matt?
No, I'm good, man.
We had a great rant tonight, didn't we, lads? I feel like that's fantastic. If you don't understand anything that happened in the show tonight, for our American listeners out there, you're saying, hey, what does that mean? Hit us up on our blog at acrossthepitch.com/blog or on Facebook, facebook.com/acrossthepitch, and let us know.
As always, for my brother from down under,
my mate from State 48 and Mr. Wizard over there. That's you, mate.
Have a good day.
Thank you. See you later.
have a good night.